Hello, everybody. I'm Seth Weissman, and welcome to another episode of Safe Real Estate. Today, we're going to talk about the crazy market that we're in and what buyers can do to try to make sure that their offers are accepted in an extreme seller's market. And first of all, I think anyone working with the buyer at the moment needs to encourage the buyer to set reasonable expectations. Because even if you do everything right, there is a good chance that the buyer is not going to be the winning bidder on any given home. But are there things the buyer can do? Absolutely. There are some tried and true things like offering a lot of money, putting up a lot of earnest money, making it an all-cash offer, making the offer one where you're buying the property as is. And if you think about all of those things, what the buyer is really doing in that instance is the buyer is accepting greater legal risk in order to get a better shot at being the winning bid on a particular piece of property. If you are saying, I'm going to buy the property without a financing contingency, the buyer's accepting that risk. If you're saying, I am going to buy the property without a right to ask for repairs, similarly, the buyer is accepting greater risk. And part of what you need to do is to make sure the buyer understands that there's a direct correlation between accepting risk and the potential reward of getting the property that the buyer wants. One thing that I'm not seeing many buyers do, which is an option, is to offer option money for the right to have a due diligence period. And I worked on a transaction a few years ago where the buyer was one of 45 bidders on a particular piece of property. The buyer was very sophisticated. He was very familiar with the condition of the house because he walked through it very, very carefully. And this particular buyer put up $50,000 in option money for the right to have a due diligence period. And just so that everyone understands, when the buyer did that, that money immediately goes to the seller. So the seller now puts $50,000 in his pocket. And if the buyer then chooses not to proceed with the purchase, the seller gets that money. Now, I'm not suggesting that buyers offer $50,000 in option money, but if a buyer really wants a house, the buyer does send a very strong message if the buyer puts up $5,000 in option money or even $2,500 in option money, because what the buyer is really saying is, I'm not going to be asking for a lot of repairs because I recognize that if the seller is unwilling to make repairs, the seller and the contract falls apart. The seller puts that option money again in his pocket from the beginning of the transaction. But option money is a way to send a message to the seller that you're a keeper, that you're going to stay in the transaction, and that absent something extremely unusual, you're willing to put that money at risk for the privilege of being considered favorably by the seller. So it may be something that you want to add to your bag of tricks in terms of trying to do things that distinguish your offer from others, but only if the buyer is willing to risk those funds. I hope this little episode of Safe Real Estate has been beneficial. As always, it's great to see you. Please continue to tune in. Bye now.